A Christian has no business being in Hollywood. At least this is something that I heard every now and then growing up with wanting to be a filmmaker, and now that I actually am one and I'm out in Hollywood, it still remains. Do I have any business being out here? Can a Christian actually make an impact in an industry that is quote unquote so wicked it's just a lost cause? To answer that, we're going to be looking at Daniel chapter 2, where we'll see 5 different characteristics that I believe a Christian can have to make an impact in Hollywood. And those 5 characteristics are faith, prayer, fellowship, patience, and boldness. So what is Daniel chapter 2 about? Well, to summarize, we have this king of Babylon, which is a very wicked nation, and it's a very wicked king, and he has a dream, and he wants his wise men to interpret the dream, but they don't know the answer. Naturally, he gets mad, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna kill you all. Not just you, but everyone in my kingdom who's a wise man. I'm gonna kill them. They're dead. And when this news is brought to Daniel, who happens to be a wise man, obviously this isn't so cool. And so Daniel kind of responds almost annoyed. He's like, we didn't even get a chance to interpret the dream. With wisdom and a calm attitude, he actually asked the people who are there to kill him right in that moment for more time to be able to interpret the dream. If Daniel's faith wasn't rooted deeply into the one true God, the moment that these people came to his house to basically cut his head off, he probably would have responded a little differently. Probably been very afraid. And let this be a lesson to us when we want to take on the world, we want to pursue God's will. We can't be just going back and forth being afraid and terrified to make decisions or stand up and do stuff. And that all starts with having our faith rooted in God. Now, moving on with the story, once his request is approved, Daniel immediately prays. Doing this shows his humility because even though he's a wise man, he knows the only way to get the answer for any of this stuff is to seek God. He understands the source of wisdom and knowledge in his place within this universe, right? God is way above, we're way below, and through prayer, we're seeking to understand his will. Now, once Daniel actually goes to pray, he actually does another thing too, which is he calls his friends who are also believers of the one true God, and he asks them to pray as well, seeing this idea of community and fellowship. And this is something that I've always struggled with, is when I feel like God is calling me to something, I feel like, well, God called me to it, so I'll handle it myself. I don't need to ask for help that makes it seem like I'm weak. This is not true. As God says, where 2 or more are gathered, so is he. So seek to surround yourself with others who are also having a similar goal with God's will. Now, the next thing we see within the story is Daniel's patience. Now, it doesn't say that he was patient, but what it does say is once they were praying and seeking an answer from God about the interpretation of this dream, it says that they got the answer in the middle of the night, implying that they were probably praying for some time. Now, it probably seems like that's actually a fast turnaround time when it comes to trying to hear from God. You know, you get the answer in less than 24 hours. But you got to think, when their lives were on the line, I'm sure it felt like an eternity waiting and praying and meditating and waiting for God to give the answer. It is so important to be patient with God's will for you. You could be pursuing something or witnessing someone for years and you feel like there's no success coming from it. Just be patient in the Lord. And lastly, the way this story ends, we see Daniel being bold. He receives the interpretation from God and he goes in front of the king and he gives the king the interpretation. And guess what? The interpretation is not a good thing. He tells the king that this kingdom is going to be overtaken and destroyed by a stronger kingdom. That could be a pretty nerve-wracking thing to say that to someone who's just about to kill you. But Daniel, this is the word of the Lord, so he's going to say it with boldness. And so you could live your life wanting to walk in God's will and make an impact for his kingdom by having faith and praying and having fellowship with people at your church and being patient in the Lord. But the moment that he calls you to make that big step, as we see Daniel having to say this in front of the king, we need to make sure that we have the boldness to do it. Now, obviously, this is all just going to be through God himself that is going to empower us. The funny thing about this story with Daniel is that it ends with the king celebrating what Daniel has done. He gives him a high-level position within the kingdom. And then if you know the other chapters of Daniel, this king who's very wicked actually ends up coming to believe and have faith in the one true living God. And so Daniel, in a very wicked nation, you could argue, made an impact. And I believe we as Christians, no matter what place you are living in, can make an impact as well.